It was on this date in 79 AD, after centuries of dormancy, Mount Vesuvius erupts in southern Italy, devastating the prosperous Roman cities of Pompeii and Herculaneum and continuing the eternity of thousands. The city, buried under a thick layer of volcanic material and mud, were never rebuilt and largely forgotten in the course of history. In the late 18th century, Pompeii and Herculaneum were rediscovered and excavated, providing an unprecedented archaeological record of the everyday life of an ancient civilization. About 3/4 of the known Pompeii victims are frozen in suspended action and show evidence of sudden muscle contractions such as curled toes and fingers. The ancient cities of Pompeii and Herculaneum thrived near the base of Mount Vesuvius at the Bay of Naples. In the time of the early Roman Empire, 20,000 people lived in Pompeii, including merchants, manufacturers, and farmers who exploited the rich soil of the region with numerous vineyards and orchards. No one suspected that the black, fertile earth was the legacy of earlier eruptions of Mount Vesuvius. Herculaneum was a city of 5,000 and a favorite summer destination for rich Romans. Named for the mythic hero Hercules, Herculaneum housed opulent villas and grand Roman baths. Gambling artifacts found in Herculaneum and a brothel unearthed in Pompeii attest to the decadent nature of the cities. There were smaller resort communities in the area as well, such as the quiet little town of Stebiae, or Stebiaea. At noon on August 24th in 79 AD, this pleasure and prosperity came to an end when the peak of Mount Vesuvius exploded, propelling a 10-mile mushroom cloud of ash and pumice into the stratosphere. For the next 12 hours, volcanic ash and a hail of pumice stones up to 3 inches in diameter showered Pompeii, forcing the city's occupants to flee in terror. Some 2,000 people stayed in Pompeii, holed up in cellars or stone structures, hoping to wait out the eruption. A westerly wind protected Herculaneum from the initial stage of the eruption, but then a giant cloud of hot ash and gas surged down the western flank of Vesuvius, engulfing the city and burning or asphyxiating all who remained. This lethal cloud was followed by a flood of volcanic mud and rock, burying the city. The people who remained in Pompeii continued their eternity on the morning of August 25th, when a cloud of toxic gas poured into the city, suffocating all that remained. A flow of rock and ash followed, collapsing roofs and walls and burying the remains of now lifeless bodies. Much of what we know about the eruption comes from an account by Pliny the Younger, who was staying west along the Bay of Naples when Vesuvius exploded. In 2 letters to the historian Tacitus, he told of how people covered their heads with pillows, the only defense against a shower of stones, and how a dark and horrible cloud charged with combustible matter suddenly broke and set forth. Some bewailed their own fate, others prayed to die. Pliny, only 17 at the time, escaped the catastrophe and later became a noted Roman writer and administrator. His uncle, Pliny the Elder, was less lucky. Pliny the Elder, a celebrated naturalist at the time of the eruption, was the commander of the Roman fleet in the Bay of Naples. After Vesuvius exploded, he took his boats across the bay to Stebiae to investigate the eruption and reassure terrified citizens. After going ashore, he was overcome by toxic gas and continued his eternity. According to Pliny the Younger's account, the eruption lasted 18 hours. Pompeii was buried under 14 to 17 feet of ash and pumice, and the nearby seacoast was drastically changed. Herculaneum was buried under more than 60 feet of mud and volcanic material. Some residents of Pompeii later returned to dig out their destroyed homes and salvage their valuables, but many treasures were left and then forgotten. In the 18th century, a well digger unearthed a marble statue on the site of Herculaneum. The local government excavated some other valuable art objects, but the project was abandoned. In 1748, a farmer found traces of Pompeii beneath his vineyard. Since then, excavations have gone on nearly without interruption until the present. In 1927, the Italian government resumed the excavation of Herculaneum, retrieving numerous art treasures, including bronze and marble statues and paintings. The remains of 2,000 men, women, and children were found at Pompeii. After continuing their eternity from asphyxiation, their bodies were covered with ash that hardened and preserved the outline of their bodies. Later, their bodies did decompose to skeletal remains, leaving a kind of plaster mold behind. Archaeologists who found these molds filled the hollows with plaster, revealing in grim detail the death pose of the victims of Vesuvius. The rest of the city is likewise frozen in time, and ordinary objects that tell the story of everyday life in Pompeii are as valuable to archaeologists as the great unearthed statues and frescoes. It wasn't until 1982 that the first human remains were found at Herculaneum, and these hundreds of skeletons bear ghastly burn marks that testify to horrifying deaths. Today, Mount Vesuvius is the only active volcano on the European mainland. Its last eruption was in 1944, and its last major eruption was in 1631. Another eruption is expected in the near future, so inhabitants, beware. August 24th in the year 1572. This was the day of the St. Bartholomew's Day massacre. King Charles IX of France, under the sway of his mother, Catherine de' Medici, orders the assassination of Huguenot Protestant leaders in Paris, setting off an orgy of killing that results in the massacre of tens of thousands of Huguenots all across France. 2 days earlier, Catherine had ordered the murder of Admiral Gaspard de Coligny, a Huguenot leader whom she felt was leading her son into war with Spain. However, Coligny was only wounded, and Charles promised to investigate the assassination in order to placate the angry Huguenots. Catherine then convinced the young king that the Huguenots were on the brink of rebellion, and he authorized the murder of their leaders by the Catholic authorities. Most of these Huguenots were in Paris at the time, celebrating the marriage of their leader, Henry of Navarre, to the king's sister, Margaret. A list of those to be killed was drawn up, headed by Coligny, who was brutally beaten and thrown out of his bedroom window just before dawn on August 24th. Once the killing started, mobs of Catholic Parisians, apparently overcome with bloodlust, began a general massacre of Huguenots. Charles issued a royal order on August 25th to halt the killing, but his pleas went unheeded as the massacre spread. Mass slaughters continued into October, reaching the provinces of Rouen, Lyon, Bourges, Bordeaux, and Orléans. An estimated 3,000 French Protestants continued their eternity in Paris, and as many as 70,000 in all of France. The massacre of St. Bartholomew's Day marked the resumption of religious civil war in France. It was August 24th in 1821 that Spain accepted Mexico's independence. 11 years after the outbreak of the Mexican War of Independence, Spanish Viceroy Juan de O'Donoghue signs the Treaty of Cordoba, which approves a plan to make Mexico an independent constitutional monarchy. In the early 19th century, Napoleon's occupation of Spain led to the outbreak of revolts all across Spanish America. On September 16th in 1810, Miguel Hidalgo y Castilla, a Catholic priest launched the Mexican War of Independence with the issuing of his Grito de Dolores, or Cry of Dolores. Dolores referring to the town of Dolores, Mexico. The revolutionary fact called for the end of the Spanish rule in Mexico, redistribution of land, and racial equality. After some initial successes, Hidalgo was defeated, captured, and executed. However, he was followed by other peasant leaders such as Jose Maria Morelos y Pavon, Mariano Matamoros, and Vicente Guerrero, who all led armies of native and racially mixed revolutionaries against the Spanish and the royalists. Let me say Mariano Matamoros again, because I kind of butchered his name. Mariano Matamoros. Okay, cool. Vicente Guerrero. Okay. Oh yeah, and Jose Maria Morelos y Pavon. Yeah, okay, that's better. Ironically, it was the royalists, made up of Mexicans and Spanish descent and other conservatives, who ultimately brought about independence. In 1820, liberals took power in Spain, and the new government promised reforms to appease the Mexican revolutionaries. In response, Mexican conservatives called for independence as a means of maintaining their privileged position in Mexican society. In early 1821, Agustin de Iturbide, the leader of the royalist forces, negotiated the plan of Iguala with Vicente Guerrero. Under the plan, Mexico would be established as an independent constitutional monarchy. The privileged position of the Catholic Church would be maintained, and Mexicans of Spanish descent would be regarded as equals to pure Spaniards. Mexicans or mixed or pure Indian blood would have lesser rights. Iturbide defeated the royalist forces still opposed to independence, and the new Spanish viceroy, lacking money, provisions, and troops, was forced to accept Mexican independence. On August 24th in 1821, O'Donoghue signed the Treaty of Cordoba, thus ending New Spain's dependence on Old Spain. In 1822, as no Bourbon monarch to rule Mexico had been found, Iturbide was proclaimed the Emperor of Mexico. However, his empire was short-lived, and in 1823, Republican leaders Santa Anna and Guadalupe Victoria deposed Iturbide and set up a republic with Guadalupe Victoria as its first president. Most of the information divulged and documented on this audio file can be verified on history.com.